Learning to become, learning to learn, learning to thrive, learning to flourish, learning to care.
Today we are celebrating the Learning Planet Festival, an event to learn about how to take care of ourselves, others and the planet. It's been a tough year for all of us, and yet the pandemic is only one of the many challenges that we are collectively facing. Wildfires, hurricanes, powerful storms are already scarring the globe. Collapse of wildlife is threatening human health, food security and well-being. Democracy and knowledge are under attack globally. Inequalities in all dimensions of human life are exploding, and the poorest and most vulnerable are particularly at risk in the face of these daunting challenges in all countries. So how do we get out of this mess? How do we heal and flourish individually and collectively? To find solutions for a sustainable and desirable future, we need inspiration, new mindsets, new ways of life, and radical collaboration to mobilize and organize the consciousness and creativity of mankind on a global scale. Leading pioneers shows us that we engage and learn better when we have agency and when we are invited to cooperate in solving problems. So we should all be invited to tackle our common challenges. And we should include the youngest. Why should we leave them out? The youngest scientific authors were 8 years old when they published their paper. The youngest Nobel Prize winner was 17 years old when she was awarded. Hundreds of millions of students could contribute to create a better future if they knew where to go and were welcomed and hosted in a suitable environment to do so. In such an environment, we could learn from one another how to learn, how to create, how to solve, how to cooperate, how to dream, and how to work together. For the past 15 years, we have been building such a cooperative learning environment at CRE to explore ways to solve problems together. We develop new learning and teaching methods, research practices and digital tools to facilitate learners' inspiration, engagement and empowerment, collaboration, problem solving and solution sharing. CRE's programs are co-constructed with learners to help them break down barriers between silos, redefine problems and find original solutions. We work with learners of all ages. We take the scientific finding that we are all born scientists very seriously, and our program starts at birth, literally. We are now also helping many organizations that share the same passion for empowering all learners from kindergarten to lifelong learners. During our journey, we have been helped and inspired by many brilliant and generous pioneers and many incredible initiatives working towards positive change in the world that deserve to be known, shared and promoted more globally. During our journey, we have been helped and inspired by many brilliant and generous pioneers and many incredible initiatives working towards positive change in the world that deserve to be known, shared and promoted more globally. There is so much out there, so much to learn from. This is our inspiration for the Learning Planet Festival, and we are deeply grateful to all the outstanding speakers and partners that have agreed to co-construct a distributed event of that magnitude, of that quality, on the International Day of Education of the United Nations. A festival of learning? A festival that invites everyone everywhere to share and celebrate meaningful learning? What a crazy idea! Well, this year, the festival provides a scene for hundreds of inspiring initiatives across the world that bring hope, facilitate meaningful engagement, and nurture collective problem solving. They show that learners can be engaged and empowered no matter how challenging the context can be. They propose practical ways to transform our schools, our universities, our companies, our administrations, our societies. They invest in human flourishing and purpose, in social connection and resilience. They invest in fair economy and inequalities reduction, in nature protection and regeneration. They foster compassion, consciousness, collaboration, critical thinking, creation, change-making. They are the seeds of the future we need. They are the seeds of the future we want. It's been a tough year for all of us, but we have come a long way. We have achieved amazing things. We have learned from our mistakes. We have helped and inspired each other. So it's time to move on and seize this opportunity to redesign our world. I hope that you will enjoy learning about these initiatives and engaging into these activities prepared with love, passion and purpose by all of the Learning Planet partners. If this is new for you, I hope that you will join the movement next year. The Learning Planet Festival is our common ground where everyone is invited to celebrate meaningful learning everywhere. We are all invited to organize an event in our school, our university, organization, village, city, country, and invite others. I hope that we will all leave the festival filled with joy, energy, and new ideas of meaningful projects to take care of ourselves, others, and the planet.
Ladies and gentlemen, colleagues and friends, my warmest greetings to you from the UNESCO Institute for Lifelong Learning in Hamburg, Germany. My name is Raúl Valdés, and I'm the coordinator of the UNESCO Global Network of Learning Cities, which is an international policy-oriented network for promoting and implementing lifelong learning at the local level. Let me start by wishing you all a happy International Day of Education. UNESCO Learning Cities around the world are joining in with the celebrations. Hopefully they can provide some inspiration while at the same time learning from your experiences. The concept of the Learning City is a people-centered learning focus approach which provides a collaborative framework for working on the diverse challenges that cities increasingly face in terms of health, digital learning, literacy, education, planning, and more. The UNESCO Global Network of Learning Cities was initiated in 2013 and currently works with 229 cities from 64 countries. It supports the achievement of all 17 Sustainable Development Goals by working to strengthen lifelong learning in the world's cities through policy dialogue, capacity development, and instruments to encourage and recognize progress made and implementing lifelong learning. Despite their very different starting points and diverse economic, political, social, and environmental contexts, many member cities of the UNESCO GNLC have initiated innovative and inclusive policies and programs that provide opportunities for their communities to benefit from lifelong learning. Cities of the network are striving for inclusive learning in the education system, realizing learning in families and communities, effective learning for and in the workplace, extending use of modern learning technologies, enhance quality in learning, and cultivate a vibrant culture of learning throughout life. We live in very challenging times, yet UNESCO Learning Cities are providing their determination to meet and overcome the challenges they face. Many member cities have demonstrated the resilience in responding to the COVID-19 crisis and have put lifelong learning at the heart of their strategies. Their initiatives were shared in a series of webinars hosted by UL between March and June this year. And in cities across world regions, those initiatives highlighted the importance of the local level as a frontier in the dissemination of health and hygiene information, as well as the provision of other vital services. For example, in Cork, Ireland, which has a long tradition of community-based learning, some structures to support learning networks were already in place prior to the health crisis. At the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, a local authority community response forum was also established in every district to help vulnerable members of the communities. In total, 30 partners organize and are cooperating. Another example is the city of Gdynia in Poland, which has formed partnerships with local volunteer groups and non-governmental organizations to maintain regular contact with vulnerable families and attend to their needs. The COVID-19 pandemic will not be the last challenge humanity has to confront. We are all aware of the potential for more health and climate-related crises in the years and decades ahead. Nevertheless, this pandemic is a clarion call for collective efforts among populations to collectively take actions and to make behavioral changes in support of sustainable development. We have only 10 years left to achieve the 17 ambitious Sustainable Development Goals indicated in the 2030 Agenda, and cities are undoubtedly key players in this collective endeavor. I invite you to learn more about the UNESCO Global Network of Learning Cities and the lifelong learning structures and programs implemented by its members. Some of you may wish to engage with these cities as partners, or you might be inspired to join the network with your city. A special track of the Learning Planet Festival is dedicated to the city network, and I hope to see many of you there. Once again, a happy International Day of Education to you all. Let us jointly celebrate the power of education and learn how to harness it well. Enjoy the festival.
Salam and greetings from Tangier, Morocco. My name is Karima Kadawi. I am the co-founder and executive president of Tankin Community Foundation for Human Development. I am really delighted to be part of this celebration of the Learning Planets Festival. I am here to tell you about the story of Tankin, the story of a process, which is a process of inquiry, learning and understanding that has been co-created with our partners within and embedded in a deeply human relationship. Our partners are the education system, neighborhoods, schools, universities, also research and corporate communities. We co-create together the conditions for the emergence of a process that we call Tankin. It's a co-creation of a safe place where we can express and we can learn to express our human potential. That human potential is the humanity that defines us and connects us. And when we learn together to co-create the conditions for its expression, it transcends us. And it transcends us into our creative eminence. And this is what we are witnessing and experiencing throughout these last 10 years with the Tankin process. We met initially a neighborhood in the outskirts of Tangier. We met them to get to know them, not because they were lacking something, but because of the potential there was in their community, the potential there was on us, and the potential that could emerge from our relationship. We have seen a process of transformation, a deeply humbling process of transformation. One of the young men last year told us, really nothing has changed. The streets are the same, the people are the same, the houses are the same. Everything is the same, yet everything is different. Our relationships have changed. We used to get together for violence. Today we get together for love. It is quite surprising to hear a young boy, and 12 years old young boy, saying, Tankin does nothing and Tankin does everything. Tankin teaches us to rely on ourselves. And yet that was said in 2012, and 6 years later in the education system we hear top management of regional education system governance body saying Tankin is giving us the key to find our own solutions. The challenges of this process are to learn together, to give time to time. And by doing that, we actually realize that we gained time. The challenges are also is to understand that it's not a process to scale, but it's a process that diffuses. It diffuses because it is embodied, because it is part of the experience. And that experience is shared and co-reflected, and it becomes self-aware. And in that self-awareness grows a whole system awareness. That process is what gives life to a diffusion process that is multi-scale, that goes throughout society. The challenge also is to, when we look at the thorn, to be able to see the rose. That means to nourish our patience in a way with the beauty of the experience, of this deep connection, of this deep human connection. Also, to be able to see the whole from the parts and the parts from the whole. Our challenge is to grow the courage to trust in our human potential and to dissolve the fears with our unconditional love. Finally, the challenge of this process is to learn not to be in the way of the process, because what we are experiencing is societal metamorphic transformation. We have seen how the Tankin process has moved from neighborhood to education system, from local to systemic. We have seen how the Tankin process has grown from community learning to community-based learning ecosystem. We have also seen how from community development we are together learning to co-create the conditions for the emergence of the ecosystem of a humanizing society. I'd like to share with you the picture of this maquette that the students of 2 high schools in Tangier have made together. They're talking about that beauty of the Tankin experience and how that morphed their sense of self and how their school went from the dark to the light. I am deeply grateful to be able to share with you the story of the Tankin process, the Tankin approach today, and I thank you very much for the opportunity.
Hi, it is my privilege to be part of the Learning Planet Festival as we celebrate learning throughout the world. I'm excited to share with you our work on future-ready learners. Since the last decade, Singapore and the world are facing fundamental shifts in the economy, society, and environment. These shifts define how we work, live, and learn. For example, technological advancements globally are reshaping business models where organizations not just compete on tangible products, but are now competing on intangible assets such as intellectual property, data, and user networks. On the environmental front, as Singapore becomes more urbanized, more resources such as matter and energy will be used. Matter and energy are limited and depleting resources. Therefore, Singapore must create sustainable practices to use these depleting resources and to reduce carbon footprint. All these challenges have fundamental implications on the readiness of our education system to develop learners. And our education system's purpose is to develop learners for the future. Therefore, it is imperative that graduates of our system must be ready and able to actively co-create the future of our environment, society, and the economy. I've led a team to analyze and synthesize extensive literature and reports to answer the following major questions. What kind of economy, society, and environment are we preparing learners for? How do we develop learners who are ready to co-create and shape that future together? As a result, we have redefined educational success. Our new definition of a successful education system includes a future dimension timeline. The definition is as follows. A successful education system is able to develop future-ready individuals who will continue to learn beyond graduation, take on future life work, and thrive in a changing society and environment. For the full outcome metrics, I invite you to read the framework which I have posted as a link. Our research team has identified new educational outcome metrics that answer the research questions, and these outcomes are aligned to the future trajectories of Singapore's economy, society, and environment. A sample of the outcomes are as follows. Learners who will practice lifelong, life-wide, and life-deep learning, embrace innovation, create new value in services and products, internalize intercultural acumen, adopt sustainable lifestyle. With new metrics come the challenge of measures. How do we measure these tangible and intangible outcomes? We employ an advanced technological tool, machine learning in terms of analytic and predictive learning models in order to identify, acquire, and analyze a vast amount of data in NIE system. The machine learning model aims to establish relationships among system variables with the outcomes of learning. For example, system variables such as student assignments, portfolios, streaming data, stored data, artifacts, curriculum design, faculty expertise, and etc. We have developed a prototype model to measure ideation in innovation. The model is able to perform natural language processing techniques on texture data, and the texture analysis is displayed as a diagrammatic flow of root words and expansion. It's able to perform sentiment analysis on the identified text and identify keywords that indicate ideation, such as belief, think, what if, propose, opinion, perhaps. We are moving progressively to develop the right models to measure the rest of the outcomes. In conclusion, we are celebrating the initial steps toward ensuring that our education system truly prepare learners who are future ready to co-create and co-shape our planet. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Pavel Luksha. For the last 12 years, I have actively worked on exploring the future of education, work, cities, space, and over 40 sectors of economy. I have co-authored open source tools of foresight that were used in over 20 countries of the world by thousands of practitioners, helping them better understand long-term perspectives and make more informed decisions. We conducted the world's largest future awareness events and catalyzed hundreds of businesses and educational projects and ecosystems. Future has always been my passion. When in 2020 COVID-19 pandemic started to unfold, I sensed that clearly something unusual started to happen. Global travel and events were cancelled, people were massively laid off, supply chains were disrupted, and businesses around the globe started to go bankrupt. I felt we needed to evaluate how serious the situation was. Is it a passing crisis? Are we expected to go back to things how it used to be? So we have conducted several projects to understand the emerging reality. In partnership between my team and WorldSkills, we aim to understand the future of economic sectors, skills and learning in the 2020s, involving over 800 experts from 49 countries, and exploring the future of industries that cover 90% of global employment. Another project comprehensively explored the predictions of over 50 leading futurists, creating a consolidated vision with over 200 economic, social, geopolitical, and cultural trends for the coming decade. Our work has confirmed we are entering into a special period of human history that in many regards can be considered decisive. The future ahead of us is full of massive and potentially mortal dangers unseen before. Climate crisis rose to the top of ranks as #1 global risk. Climate change creates problems for billions of people with food security, water availability, and health conditions. Geopolitical risks are escalating, and there are hints that a new Cold War between major economic powers of the world began to unfold. Dormant ethnic and religious conflicts reappear, contributing to global security challenges. It is worth remembering that the first global war of the 21st century could easily be its last one, given all kinds of lethal technologies possessed by humans, such as the thermonuclear weapons. Technological progress of the 21st century, including rapid digitalization, also creates massive risks. The humankind is on the verge of surveillance state and surveillance capitalism, when our every step will be tracked by digitally enhanced environments, and our behaviors are also increasingly shaped by its algorithms, often not to our own benefits as human beings. Furthermore, the ongoing creation of an unsupervised, self-improving artificial intelligence can open a Pandora box that humanity won't be able to close. But it doesn't mean our future is all dark and grim. Our society has created the largest systems of collaboration in the history of humanity, supported by communication networks such as Internet. Our scientific, technological, and social innovations rapidly help to eradicate diseases and hunger around the globe, and provide every human being with opportunities to learn and flourish. Digital transformation invites us to create human-centered economy when our best human capacities, our creativity, our collaboration, even our kindness, will be the foundation of our collective well-being. We are also gradually learning how to take care of our planet and how to use sustainable and regenerative approaches to make our industries, cities, and society friendly to nature and all life. Our society has accumulated an enormous wealth of knowledge, technologies, and capital. We have more people than ever dedicated to creating innovations and solving the world's problems. To give you an example, 90% of all scientists and engineers who have ever lived are living today. We have everything in our hands and are better equipped than ever to solve world's challenges. The 2020s can be the most hopeful decade, and it can become the most disastrous decade in the history. And so, what is the secret ingredient required to secure the flourishing future for all? It is our attitude, our mindset, our approach to life. Many of us are not very open to learning, to collaborating, to trusting one another. But even more important is our way of engaging with the future. Are we passive future takers, or do we empower ourselves to be future makers and co-creators? The future is constantly shaped by our actions. If we address environmental issues, design new technologies, or struggle for social justice, it is through our action that the future will be created. If we practice kindness with our neighbors, or teach good things to our children, it is through our actions that the future is seeded. Even if we decide not to make choices about the future and only focus on our present problems, our choices impact our future. Passivity, ignorance, selfishness, or short-term thinking often all lead to less desired futures. And so the future is not given to us, it is practiced by us. By choosing to consciously practice it, to be aware of our possibilities, we create the world that we want to see. We call this approach Protopia. In the past, humans were often inspired by utopias. Utopia means in Latin a place that doesn't exist. We understand that utopias are not realistic, yet our ancestors in the past were often tempted by utopias, and this temptation led to frustration, oppression, and bloody conflicts. Protopia offers to create optimistic but achievable future, something we can achieve if we try. Most important, it is not the future we make for someone else, it is the future we create for ourselves. The future that is created by doing what we value, embodying what we want and hope for. And so, if we want the world to be kind or just, we need to embody qualities of kindness and justice. We need to become the world we want to see. By learning to do it together with others, with our family, friends, peers, colleagues, we create Protopia. I want to emphasize that this approach is different from innovations that solve problems of the world. It is not a technology or tool we create for others. First and most of all, it is the way of being, thinking, and acting, something we do for ourselves. It is not something we sell. It is what we learn and practice all the time. Yet many innovators in agriculture, cities, arts, management, education begin acting in this way. There is an emerging movement in the world, the movement that connects human learning and action to creating the world that works for all. By choosing to become future practitioners, we all become this emerging movement. In our projects in Russia and worldwide, we learn how to practice and the future we want to see. And we want to invite you to learn with us, and many innovators and trailblazers in all regions of our planet. We are open for cooperation and ready to act together. We invite you to explore our vision of the future, our reports on future of education, work, and society. Discuss it and co-create it with us. Explore our global map of future practices, the map of communities and solutions that work towards Protopia. Join our educational projects on Protopia or invite us to join yours. The coming decade is decisive, and the future depends on all of us. Let's learn to make Protopia real.
Hello, everybody. Let me wish all of you a happy learning year 2021. And thank you to the organizers for the opportunity to share with you some ideas and aspects of what we are doing at the Club of Rome in relation with the goals and the context of the Learning Planet initiative. We put to that a label which is the fifth element, to give a symbolic but strong message that we think we have to learn from life. Life as a fundamental principle with all its complexity, richness, and beauty, from which we have to learn. And to learn in a strong sense of the word, meaning that what happens largely today is that we don't learn what we already know. So learning goes beyond just knowing. It goes beyond the conscious understanding of something. And learning doesn't happen if or until new patterns exist and are practiced. And this is valid at the individual level, but this is also very much true at the societal level. And in a way, we can see that at the societal level, we have not been learning what we already knew. If we look at the many challenges we face today, you name them: climate change, loss of biodiversity, growth of social inequalities, geopolitical tensions, exhaustion of non-renewable resources, and so on. All of them, including the COVID pandemic, all of these issues were anticipated, and in some cases, many decades ago. But we have not developed the patterns which are needed, the societal patterns which are needed to deal with them and to transform them into something else and to give birth to desirable futures. So now we're at a point where it looks like, oh my God, human development leads to human suicide. Not only to the destruction of the planet, nature, and so on, but to the suicide of humanity. So it doesn't sound like learning from the knowledge we already had. And what do we need to make this last mile, but crucial last mile between knowledge and learning? For one, I think we need to change the questions that we address. And just to give an example, if we look at energy transition, we know since long that we need to shift from fossil fuels to something else, and we have been able to develop renewable energies. But we are not yet learning in practice this need of renewable energies because fossil fuels are still dominant. But maybe there is something else that we haven't learned or we haven't understood, and this is critical for this step of going from knowledge to learning. Maybe we should look at that from another angle and ask what is required to combine human well-being with a healthy biosphere. How could we imagine human well-being happening at a minimal level of ecological footprint? How could we achieve that? And then this would lead to the question of what is human well-being? Where does it come from? And if we realize that we know since the beginning of times, we know that well-being is determined by the quality of our relationships with other humans, with other living beings, and with time, then we can face that question of compatibility of human well-being. And when I say human well-being, I'm meaning a universal and equitable well-being, the compatibility of that with a healthy biosphere. So we have to change the questions. For that, probably we have to change the stage in which new knowledge and education happens. All that has been put in a box of specialized institutions separate from society. And this is not working. We do not only need the knowledge of experts, we need society to learn collectively as communities, as citizens. And that's a huge transformation of the concept of learning that we have today. A transformation which goes also through changing roles, so that it's not anymore about teaching some knowledge from one generation to the next. It's a process in which everybody has to be involved, and it's about learning together. The process itself is completely different, and it's about sharing knowledge that all cultures do have, some of them very ancient. It's also about sharing indigenous knowledge for the benefit of the whole of humanity. So these are some of the ideas which are bold, I know, and it's not a minor. We are not talking about a minor transformation, but there is no option other than going into this direction of learning in new ways, so that at last we learn what we already know for the sake of humanity and for the sake of desirable futures. Thank you very much for your attention.
Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished participants, colleagues, and dear friends. I am Denise Bax, Head of Communication, Cities and Events Unit, Culture Sector at UNESCO. It is my pleasure to be here with you all today to participate in the second edition of the Learning Planet Festival to celebrate the International Day of Education. 5 billion people are projected to live in cities by 2050. With this perspective of a more important urban population in the coming decades, cities play a growing role in the pursuit of sustainable development and in the achievement of the international development agendas, including the UN's 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, the 2063 African Agenda, amongst others. Urban history shows us that cities are hubs of innovation. They are the places where new economic ideas crystallize, where diverse groupings of people live together as neighbors, and where social and cultural experiments emerge, to name a few. This recognition was further materialized through the inclusion of SDG Goal 11 of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Make cities and human settlements inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable. Education encourages productivity and innovation in cities and can transform them into knowledge economies. Culture and creativity play an essential and enabling role in developing fertile grounds to support education, as well as key in the success of sustainable urban development. To build people-centered cities, a holistic and integrated approach to urban development needs to take into account education and knowledge, as well as culture and creativity. The UNESCO Creative Cities Network, launched in 2004, is the organization's flagship program on cities that have identified culture and creativity as a strategic lever for sustainable urban development. The network covers 7 creative fields, namely crafts and folk art, design, film, gastronomy, literature, media arts, and music. With 246 member cities from over 80 countries, the UCCN provides its members a platform for exchange and collaboration, promoting knowledge sharing and mutual learning amongst different stakeholders and actors in cities around the world. To illustrate, I would like to share with you a few examples from our member cities. Singapore, a creative city of design since 2017, is organizing the 2021 Design Education Summit that provides a key platform for educators and industry professionals to learn, network, and co-develop ideas about the adoption of design in education. Furthermore, in response to the lockdowns and confinements caused by the COVID-19 pandemic, creative cities worldwide initiated cultural leverage responses to support inhabitants in terms of continuation of education system, building databases, as well as providing access to essential means. For instance, led by Detroit and Kortrijk, the Creative Cities of Design created an open database which, with projects and initiatives that leverage design and innovation to help cities and citizens to utilize the design potential to inspire better responses. Besides, the Creative City of Wonju launched the Drive-Through initiative to support its citizens to continue having access to libraries and books. Yamagata, a creative city of film, and Macau, a creative city of gastronomy, on the other hand, offered respectively online film and gastronomic courses in collaboration with universities and academics to enhance skills and capacities of students and professionals. The challenges that we are facing today are global. Therefore, the solutions should be devised and developed collectively by all stakeholders across the world. Cities, being incubators of creativity and innovation, are places where solutions to such global challenges can be devised and implemented. To further reinforce UNESCO's work on cities and build a comprehensive and transversal approach to its endeavor for the implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development in the urban context, UNESCO launched the UNESCO Cities Platform, or the UCP. The platform brings together the organizations, aid, networks, and programs dedicated or closely related to cities, including UNESCO's Creative Cities Network, to undertake collective efforts to support cities and communities in building a sustainable future for all. The global theme of the festival, Learning to Take Care of Oneself, Others, and the Planet, echoes the founding principles and objectives of UNESCO's work on and with cities. Working together and forging new partnerships and collaboration at local, national, and international levels will greatly contribute to our collective responses to the global challenges and opportunities of our time. I would like to thank you for your attention and wish the festival all the very success.
It's great to be part of your Festival of Education, and I want to share some thoughts which may be a little bit different from what you're hearing elsewhere, and I hope make it worth your while spending the next 3 or 4 minutes listening to me. So my name's Jeff Mulgan. I'm currently a professor at University College London. In the past, I've worked in governments, running teams top down for prime ministers in a few countries. I've also been a social entrepreneur, an innovator working from the ground up. And I've become more and more struck that something is badly missing in our education, and that thing is related to what's missing in our society at the time we need it more than ever, and that is wisdom. We are called Homo sapiens, technically, but as a race, we're not always that wise. At the moment, despite all the scientific knowledge and data and information we have, many of our leaders have been doing absolutely crazy, daft things in the last few years. Definitely not very wise. We can see many nations which are much less wise than the people within them. We can see our social media platforms like Twitter can sometimes spread lies and misinformation much more effectively than they promote thoughtful, deliberative, reflective wisdom. So I think we have a bit of a problem. And the weird thing is that very few schools or universities see it as their responsibility to solve this problem. How many of them actually cultivate wisdom deliberately in their students in a way that perhaps they might have done 1,000, 2,000 years ago when that was seen as a central task of education. So I've been looking at what can be done to make wisdom perhaps a bit more graspable, a bit more something we can learn as a habit. And I found that a crucial thing is breaking free from some of the stereotypes we have of wisdom. The idea it's all about a man sitting on a mountain top or in a cave away from the rest of humanity, uttering the occasional elliptical observation. There are great insights in the world's wisdom traditions, but some things we need now are a bit different from that. So here's a few examples and how they could be incorporated into the life of a school or university. The first key to wisdom is realizing that it's essentially a loop. You best become wise by thinking about what you expect to happen, perhaps in your life, your relationships, perhaps in global affairs, observing what actually happens and then refining the way you think, your models, your understanding in the light of reality. This is such an obvious point, but it's incredibly rare in many of our institutions to do that kind of loop thinking, and it's quite hard work in our own lives. But being much more explicit about it is the key to really becoming wise about different things, wise about, say, love or money or academia or science or business success and so on. Secondly, wisdom has to involve multiplicity, seeing things from multiple angles, looking at a tree and seeing not just its biology and its sap and its photosynthesis, but also perhaps its meanings, its culture, its relationships with other trees, or looking at COVID and seeing it not just as a health epidemic, but a problem of economics and society and loneliness and politics and global cooperation as well. As part of that, we have to learn the habits of thinking ethically, with ethics as part of reasoning. So when you ask what is the right thing to do, this is an ethical question. It's not just the correct answer technically, but what will be right for me or you or our ancestors or strangers is vital as a habit of thinking. And many of the cleverest minds of the last 2 or 3 decades, particularly in the digital industries, simply lacked that habit of thinking ethically about what they were doing, and so made some terribly bad mistakes. Next, we need to see wisdom as something as much collective as individual. You may be incredibly wise in your head, but you'll be much wiser in a team, in a group with others, tapping your collective intelligence. And much of what we need to become much better at is the forms of meetings and collaboration, which really do that well. And in those meetings, as in your head, one of the routes to wisdom is having arguments, not just quietly coming to a point of view, but consciously interrogating different options, seeing their strengths and weaknesses, not being shy about doing that in a group. It's what makes some of the best sports teams and music groups really good, is their willingness to have ferocious arguments about what the right course of action is, but without their egos involved. And then we need an integrative way of thinking. Ours is an era where things are so much more connected than in the past. Our biosphere, our cyberspace, our lives. And so we need habits of mind which think in multiple dimensions simultaneously, see how the ecological, the social, the economic, the engineering all intersect, and can think holistically. That is perhaps the key to wisdom. And I hope that some of the things I've just talked about become absolutely mainstream for any school, not just secondary, but also primary schools, for universities, and that we increasingly design our big institutions, the UN, parliaments, governments, so they bring out the greatest collective wisdom of the society, and not the least. And there's an urgency to doing this. Many of the trends right now are going in the wrong direction, not the right direction. They are dumbing down, dampening wisdom, not amplifying it. And that makes it much less likely that we will solve our really big shared problems in the next few years, whether it's in carbon and climate change, or learning to live with very powerful artificial intelligence. So that's why this is not a theoretical question. This is the most intensely practical question facing education across the world right now. How can we cultivate a practical, applied wisdom, which means we have billions of people well suited for solving the problems of the years ahead? And hopefully that makes some sense to you, and hopefully maybe you're already part of the solution. Thank you.
3 years ago, the OECD came together with the NCEE in Washington and a number of high-performing systems, and we created a project called High Performing Systems for Tomorrow. We had 2 questions. One, how might the best systems in the world pool what they know to improve their learning systems even further? A sort of final 5% question. And the second question was, as we look towards the world of AI, artificial intelligence, how might learning systems, the best in the world, again, need to develop and respond? And I wanted to talk now about the second of those questions, the AI question. This is work in progress. No country is bound to its conclusions. At the moment, it's just a very interesting conversation, but it could be influential, and it's certainly worth doing. It's led us to think about education for human flourishing, and it's that I want to unpack a bit right now. So, what does AI mean for human beings? Well, it has an economic, a political meaning, and also meaning for us as individuals. Economically, AI could sweep away those jobs that have not already been automated, casting billions out of work. Politically, well, it could be that AI algorithms start to take the political decisions that these days, right now, we think we take for ourselves in communities and at the ballot box. AI might say, well, this is how you've always voted before. Why not just do that again? In terms of our individual personalities, our sense of who we are, well, for many centuries, rightly or wrongly, human beings have felt that they were the sentient ones. It was humans who knew, who understood. Could be that over the next few years, a generation of machines will come through that can make that claim for themselves. And where will that leave us, our sense of who we are? So on those grounds, AI matters. It matters to educators more than what will AI do in the classroom to enhance ed tech, though it'll do a lot of things. It really matters because it creates a different world in which education requires something different altogether. So what do we mean by the flourishing life, human flourishing? Go back to Aristotle, writing 2,500 years ago. He said, the flourishing life consists of moral, reason-infused activities, meaningful for the individual, and have a significance in the world. That's what Aristotle wrote, and in many ways Confucius wrote in similar fashion in another part of the world. So could you still say that any of that is relevant, that Aristotelian concept, in an AI world? I think you could. We certainly need to take a bigger perspective. Climate change, social justice, biotech, the ability for rich people to buy a different kind of future, an enhanced future for their children. All of these things tell us that we now need to think more of sustainable values for the human race as a whole, less of situational values for me here today. But I certainly think that with robots coming, it'll also be important that we are moral-infused, reason-infused individuals. Those are surely things that we associate less with robots than with us. So the case for Aristotle in many ways holds good. And therefore, education's responsibility is to equip us for human flourishing, defined just like that. Again, reason-infused moral activities that make us feel we're meaningful and also give us some sense of significance in the world. Well, over the last few years, the OECD has thought very hard about education for 2030. So what's the difference between emerging views on education for the AI world and education for 2030? I think there are two in particular, one to do with orientation, the other to do with competencies. Orientation, 2030, that work suggested that the real orientation, what should characterize educated people, would be co-agency. Making things happen, taking responsibility, and doing it with others. That must be important. But for an AI world, could there be something else as well? Simply, and a bigger thought, the orientation towards the future. Being future ready is one thing, though perhaps a bit bloodless. Being future literate, knowing how to think about the future, to anticipate, that's got to be something else. But also, I think there's something in those leadership programs, for example, Otto Scharmer's work at MIT in the States, which see us as systems thinkers working with others to co-imagine, to co-inspire, to co-create a better future. I think that a futures orientation conceived like that could be powerful and could drive forward education for human flourishing. Secondly, competences. The 2030 work suggested that we all needed a small set of complex competencies, typically put together by adding cognitive skills, social and emotional skills, values, and attitudes. And that seems right. But the AI work puts forward 3 particular competencies, very complex, I think, that might distinguish us absolutely from what machines will be able to do. One is adaptive expertise. This is problem solving, our old friend, which has in many ways characterized education for 30 years. But adaptive problem solving, taking the ideas and the skills built in one situation and transferring them into another different situation and solving that problem, something that AI finds difficult. The second distinguishing competence might be ethical decision making, putting metacognition to the center, but taking decisions about our own lives, the lives of others, and the lives of others in a bigger frame, the political frame. How can we bring humility and multiple perspectives and knowledge of ourselves in every sense in order to be ethical decision makers, perspectival metacognition? And the third competence, distinguishing, I think, humans from robots, could be aesthetic perception, that ability to judge what is beautiful and what is fine, something, again, that robots don't excel at, as far as we know, yet. So that is the work that the OECD has been doing with partner countries. There are other related questions that we're thinking about. If that's what humans should learn for a human flourishing life in the world of AI, in what learning environments, assessed how, what might that mean for teachers, and how could teachers support individuals in these critical ways? And finally, what might it mean for the design of systems? All of that lies ahead, and we certainly expect to work on in this area for another 3 years or so. We feel that this work could be a North Star for some of the OECD's programs, including PISA, and that it could make a real difference for systems, for schools, for teachers, and for school leaders, and above all, for learners. So, work in progress, but valuable work, pioneering work, and I hope you'll watch this space.
In our lab at the Weizmann Institute of Science in Israel, we look at the world and try to quantify what's in it. We asked ourselves, what do we have in terms of living mass? How much mass do we have of plants versus bacteria, of animals versus fungi, and try to find what weighs the most. This is what we were started with, and then we came up with the question, the living world is something that is relatively constant in terms of overall mass, even somewhat decreasing because of all sorts of things we humanity are doing to the planet. But at the same time, we know that there's something else happening on the planet, and that is us, humanity, adding things that we build and create and produce. This can also be called anthropogenic mass, in contrast to the living world, which consists of biomass. And we know that this anthropogenic mass, the things that we humanity produce, like roads, like cars, like phones, is something that accumulates rapidly, while the biomass is relatively constant. And I was taught when I was in school that when you have one thing that is relatively constant and one that is rapidly increasing, at some point they would intersect. And at this point in time, there will be on the planet Earth more things that are human-made than all the living things combined. And we were curious about when would that time occur. And the answer that we found is that this is happening at the year 2020, meaning right now. In order to do our study, we had to collect a lot of information because you need to know the mass of all living things, no matter where they are, in the ocean, on land, in the deserts, or in the forest. And we also needed to know about all the things that humanity produced, meaning the cement and the bricks and the cell phones and the cars and all the plastic. For that, luckily, we could build on many, many years of the community collecting information. People sometimes ask me, how is it important to realize the fact that we have more mass that humanity has produced on Earth starting 2020 than all the living things on Earth? So I think it's important to clarify, it's not that something magical happens and at this transition point the whole world changes immediately. It's a gradual process that is happening on the face of the Earth. We really transformed the situation from human impacts and human production being tiny to human artifacts and mass being equal, and very soon much more than all the living things on Earth. I think even just realizing the fact that we are at this point where humanity is such a large effector and such a large force in shaping the planet, the face of the Earth, already tells us something about our place and our responsibility, and each one could consider what kind of decisions they could do. It might be about the size of the house they're building, or how much consumption are they doing, how much they're trying to reuse things, and how much are they spending the money in a way that creates more and more artifacts, or try to think how to do it in a way that uses the natural resources more sparingly and tries to conserve as much as possible. And so even though none of us could solve the problem by themselves, I think together, both the realization and the action that could come from such a realization could make a difference.
Hi, I'm Diana Aiton-Schenker, and I am the CEO of Leonardo, the International Society of Arts, Sciences, and Technology. We are a global creative enterprising think tank, and we are trying to drive innovation at the nexus of art, science, technology to transform our future into a more regenerative, just, and vibrant world. We do this through a full cycle creative engine. We offer publications and other kinds of knowledge dissemination in media, and programs and other kinds of community building opportunities. Our publications include our award-winning journals and books that we issue in and develop in partnership with MIT Press, reaching over 500,000 people in 75 countries and sharing the most thought-provoking and mind-bending scholarship that's interdisciplinary between art, science, technology. We also are exploring and experimenting with publishing in new media, integrating new technologies of augmented reality, virtual reality, and other media of podcasts and video, and we're excited about those frontiers. Through our programs, we convene and curate and celebrate the growing community of art scientists and technologists who are exploring who we are as a species and as a planet through our creative practice. Our programs include our singular signature program, the Laser Network, of now 47 hosted salons in cities around the world, as well as a growing global network of art science residencies, of fellowships, and of creative experience with the scientific and technology communities. So through these different aspects of how we generate creativity in the world, we mobilize a community of thought leaders who are reimagining what our world is becoming. The critical obstacles we face are faced by all of us, and that's the existential question of how we can become more human and more humane at a time when our world and our systems and our society are changing at an unprecedented pace. This pace of accelerated change and adaptation requires us to think and practice collaboratively, collectively, and creatively outside the box of business as usual. And that's where artists and scientists and technologists come in. I believe we teach what we need to learn. And as we teach the creative practices, we are modeling what we need to learn as a species to enhance our humanity. I'm proud that during this year of upheaval and uprooting of so many of the systems we were dependent on, accelerated by the global pandemic of COVID, the syndemic of intersecting crises from COVID to reckoning with social injustice and inequity, to the climate crisis, which is underscoring everything of and every aspect of our work as a species. Amidst this, we were not only able to pivot and adapt to the distancing that we needed to adopt for our safety and health, but also able to expand and deepen our partnerships to grow our connecting and connective tissue of the ecosystem of interdisciplinary creative teachers and learners and practitioners, the Leosphere of Leonardo. I'm proud that we were able to listen and continue to learn from our peers who are leading us in finding new ways to co-create what it means to be a learning and dynamic living social enterprise. What we are looking to build now is the opportunities that continue to build bridges and cut across previously entrenched frontiers and gaps of language and geography and media, so that through our collaborative, collective efforts, we can share our art, science, technology enterprises and creative work in not only English and French, but Spanish and Russian and Chinese. We can not only deliver the world's leading peer-reviewed academic print journal in written form, but in digital work, in creative arts, in music, and in experience. I'm also inspired that during this time of transition, we were able to identify core creative practices that are the through line between art, science, and technology: creative content generation, creative collaboration, creative connection and communication, creative contemplation and creative critique. And all of these creative practices teach us to learn the key to developing effective collective problem solving. And that's building an ecology of courage and compassion. Courage to become more human and more humane. Compassion in our humanity as we explore this fluid and vibrant collaborative work across art, science, and technology with Leonardo and all those we're learning from and with, and in the process, ourselves becoming more human and more humane.
Hello, Learning Planet Festival. My name is Ola Witkowski. I'm the Director of Research at Cross Labs, also conducting research in models of emergent communication and intelligent life at the Earth Life Science Institute at Tokyo Tech, and I'm also teaching information science at the University of Tokyo. I also co-founded Y House in New York City, for those of you who might be familiar with us. And I'm super happy to be here today to virtually take part to this very nice festival. And today I'd like to introduce our new model for the university that we called Cross Labs. It's a new concept and a new research institute in Japan, which, as you may know, is a very special place right now, a cradle for development of very promising science, not only happening in the universities, but also in the industry. And we are seeing a lot of potential for cooperation between both and them working hand in hand. And I'll come to that in a minute. But yeah, this is really the research topic of Cross Labs here. It's creating this new kind of university. And I co-founded Cross Labs 2 years ago in 2019. And its model is right between academia and the industry, but also globally embedded and oriented towards social and environmental good of for human society. So what does it mean really to have a new model of university? So it's an old thing, right? The university has existed for a very long time, and its purpose is globally the same in our view, and it's the guardian of reason. It's also preserving this scientific and philosophical openness, I guess, and preserving pure fundamental research from dominant public opinions. So Cross Labs' mission is to pursue advanced fundamental scientific research with the mission of understanding intelligence. And it's really this intelligence that is at the center of our study, including artificial intelligence, AI, but also intelligence found in nature. And our goal is bringing this and technology that is linked to it to all of human society for each and everyone to live better and be better to each other. We tackle fundamental research questions in the sciences of intelligence, that is, artificial intelligence, artificial life, complexity theory, information science, neuroscience, cognitive science in general, to understand really mathematically, mechanistically, what the laws of intelligence really are. That includes also a phenomenological component. We want to understand what the nature of intelligence and consciousness is, and we want to be able to also replicate it, because something you understand is something you can also recreate. We are facing a number of challenges, of course, and the first one would be that there is no really full scientific understanding of intelligence that really exists at this time. And perhaps that's because we don't possess the knowledge yet of its mathematics. It might be that we need to invent a new type of mathematics in order to fully capture and describe it, a new sort of algebra, if you will. Also, traditional academia hasn't adapted yet to cope with this fast-paced new area of science, such as AI, and we see it evolving really online, maybe on social media in a bit of an erratic way, because the academic really structure doesn't have a method for a very fast-paced kind of science yet. And we really need to also construct a truly interdisciplinary or cross-transdisciplinary network to tackle its understanding. And that should really pan and translate over all disciplines, dealing with our technical knowledge of intelligence processes, not only in engineering, in contact with, well, solving everyday problems. Of course, that's important in society, not only in statistical machine learning, which is the leading thing, deep learning, you heard about all that, but also in cognitive psychology, philosophy of mind, everywhere where you have traditions and sciences that have very different angles, tackling different facets of what intelligence really is. And we have to face them all together, and they're struggling and should be struggling, of course, but not in isolation. They should be really interacting very closely with each other. And we believe in a structure that would happen under the same roof, and this is why we created Cross Labs with this interdisciplinary method in mind, developing really this language on an everyday basis to communicate with each other to create a better understanding of what intelligence really is. And lastly, one challenge and orientation that we have at Cross Labs is to tackle all of this hand in hand with the industry. That means we find it really important that we should go beyond only academic disciplines too, and work closely with, well, people who are dealing with making our society a better place every day. So that means policy makers, but also engineers of development of our society, and every domain of the industry too. That means manufacturing, all the businesses providing practical services to society, and healthcare, construction, many areas of technology. And at Cross Labs, we really intend to bridge this gap between academia and society, and really integrate those intelligence disciplines I mentioned before, AI, cognitive neuroscience, A-Life, to foster innovative technologies at the service of a better, wiser, more balanced society, really. So we publish a bunch of scientific papers that are our everyday bread and butter, and last month in Nature, Frontiers, etc., other places. But also we have a blog, and we want to connect with, really everyone who is interested in reading about our research. And we also just created a new scientific journal, IMI, for Innovations in Machine Intelligence, so imijournal.org. You can find everything on our website. Also, it's if you're interested in that, we are welcoming articles right now on natural and artificial intelligence. And yeah, we organize a bunch of activities too. You'll find our monthly talk series on YouTube. You search for Cross Labs on YouTube, and I feel like I'm advertising now, but yeah, it's kind of fun. If you join us online, we're trying to cope with the current situation by having fun, talking about these topics very deeply, and also fostering conversations with everyone really present. This month we have Julian Togelius from NYU talking about AGI, artificial general intelligence, and how to reach it. Next month on morphocomputing, etc., reinforcement learning and new ways to do it. We're interested in agency as well. We'll have a speaker about that. And we have other types of events. If you are here, we are also co-organizing the A-Life conference this year. It will be in Prague. Last year it was in Montreal, and also Tokyo. We have a special edition. We'll have a special workshop also there about social and environmental good with artificial life, and much more if you are in the area, of course. Anyways, I'm wishing all of you the best in 2021. Let's understand ourselves better.
Learning to share, learning to help, learning to understand, learning to solve, learning to collaborate.
Hello, I'm Urvashi Sani. I live and work in Lucknow, Uttar Pradesh, in India. I am the founder and the CEO of Study Hall Educational Foundation, and I want to introduce my organization to you. Study Hall Education Foundation began its work in 1986 with the goal of redefining education and providing a model of how a child-responsive, socially responsible education can look like. We have worked at redefining education, widening and broadening its scope, and basing it on a foundation of social justice, peace, and love. We really believe that education should not only be about preparing children for successful livelihoods, of course it should do that, but it can do much more. It can teach lessons of equality, lessons of empathy, lessons of peace, along with lessons of math, science, history, geography, and language. We run several schools in rural and urban areas. We have a college and we run outreach programs for out-of-school children. We collaborate with governments, we train teachers, and we build curricula which will help us to achieve our vision, which is to educate everyone to be an active democratic citizen, socially responsible, believing in the democratic values of equality, liberty, fraternity, and living it. We really believe that we don't have thriving democracies because we have not taken the trouble to educate our populace, our children, our future generations, in the core values of democracy. One of the main obstacles that we have faced in the 35 years that we've been working is that even after so many years, people still define education very, very narrowly. And it still has its goal of preparing children for the labor force. So trying to change that definition is a huge challenge for us. Secondly, I live in India. And even though we became a democracy when we achieved our independence in 1947, and we have one of the finest constitutions in the world, we still had a very strong feudal mindset. It was there before the British came, and they only reinforced it. So we got a democratic constitution, but we still had feudal mindsets. And our founding parents, whereas they gave us our freedom and they gave us a great constitution, what they didn't do was put in place a program wherein future generations could be educated out of their feudal mindsets. So we have made it our mission to educate children for democracy. We have put in place a critical feminist pedagogy. We have developed curricula for gender equality, for caste equality, and we are working at helping students move out of their communal mindsets as well. What have we achieved so far? I think one of our biggest achievements has been that we have provided an example of what a transformative education can look like. I believe that education has the power to be a very strong transformative force, individually and socially, but provided education is transformed. We have walked our talk, and over years we have shown how you can build an inclusive, caring, empathetic, socially responsible education organization. We have not only widened the definition, but we have shown practical ways on how this idea of education can be realized. What has been our most successful collaboration so far? We are humbly audacious, and we know that though we have audacious goals, we can't do this alone. Our most successful collaboration so far has really been with the government, and I believe that is really important, because if you want to achieve scale, then you must look at the government school system. We have worked with over 1,000 schools so far. We've trained more than 100,000 teachers, and through our technology platform and all our programs, we've reached more than 5 million children. With the government, we have been training their teachers in critical feminist pedagogy so that they can teach their girls that they are equal autonomous persons deserving respect, and they should fight discrimination, and teach their boys that though patriarchy is not their fault, it gives them unearned privilege, and it is very cruel to their mothers, their sisters, their girlfriends, their wives, and all the other women that they love. And I'm very happy to report that we have graduated young men and women who have actually been advocates for girls' rights. Girls have been advocates for themselves, and they have conducted large campaigns in the community. We call them India's Daughters campaigns, where girls and boys together have walked into communities, conducted signature campaigns, convinced parents about the injustice of child marriage, and have managed to stop many of them. Our students and our graduates are active democratic citizens. They conduct critical dialogues in the community. They have managed to teach lessons of equality in their families and in their communities, and been able to stop domestic violence and child marriage considerably. And in a state of like Uttar Pradesh, that is a remarkable achievement.
At Guru, we have built a GPS for learning that starts with the premise that you can't figure out a learning path for a learner if you don't know precisely where they are. Guru Navigator accurately locates the learner across many facets, including knowledge in various subjects, and then guides them to any learning destination, using the most optimal content, resources, and tools from any interoperable providers that include digital content and tools, offline tasks, or group activities like projects and presentations. This GPS for learning is being used by more than 7 million learners worldwide, over 3,000 schools, and over 65 collaborators, from pre-K to skills training and beyond. Imagine a world without GPS navigation, a world where the only way to get around was with a bunch of static bus tour maps that quickly become dated. This is similar to the foundation education is built on today, designed to follow linear paths that reflect subject matter expertise, but cannot take into account the learner's changing needs, circumstances, or goals. But what if we could empower the learning ecosystem by providing them a precise understanding of the learner, a map of the educational landscape, and research-backed paths to navigate that map? If the ecosystem could know the student's varying proficiency, their interests, their local contexts, their different learning abilities and preferences, and then be given a research-backed map of learning with all possible routes, then they could be empowered to provide personal GPS-like learning paths that significantly improve learning outcomes. And this is what we have done. We have built free and open navigator tools to empower the whole learning ecosystem. This set of navigator tools is set up as a learning exchange, where each stakeholder, while they may use a different set of navigator tools and never interact with one another, their usage contributes to the learning generated. It is this learning exchange that enables systemic change. It empowers the ecosystem where they are at within their context to solve their problems, all the while focusing solutions towards better supporting the learner. At Guru, we hold the bar extremely high for the governance of this learning exchange with respect to data security, privacy, and ethics in AI. Learners and their institutions own their data, not Guru. We comply with COPPA, FERPA, GDPR, and local privacy laws. Guru Navigator seeks consent from learners to use their data for personalization. And researchers, similarly, seek consent from the user's institution to access their anonymized data. Guru uses industry best practices for physical and virtual data security. And we work with researchers from leading universities to ensure ethics in AI. And all this comes together to produce real-world impact. Low-income and minority students are filling significant gaps in their learning. Teachers in rural India are improving their productivity by more than 20% while doubling their students' rate of learning. Sewing machine operators are upskilling themselves and improving their livelihoods. And engineers at a Silicon Valley company are advancing their team's knowledge on cybersecurity, web development, and other areas. But we still have a long way to go. While we have the GPS-like tools, our current map covers a small fraction of what's available. We still have much more to map out. As more collaborators join us to scale this map, we will be able to empower more learners to learn anything they want to. We have the opportunity to get the entire ecosystem to work together to solve this challenge. from companies to learning institutions to civil society organizations and governments. Each of us could collaborate seamlessly to scale this impact. Let me share with you how. Solving this challenge cannot be done by building a predetermined solution. We need solutions to emerge, solutions that work in local contexts and scale to global reach. There are three key elements needed for solutions to these complex challenges to emerge. We first need a common foundation, a framework within which to operate. We call this the Guru Navigator, which is a set of free and open tools set up as a learning exchange. It's here where learners access educational content, interact with their peers, and explore all that can be learned. And it's where the data generated serves to continually assess and personalize their pathways. It's here where instructors easily find effective open resources and assessments to use in their teaching. It's where they monitor data and provide personalized interventions to support their learners. And it's where school leaders track outcomes and impact, supporting the solutions that are driving change. The second element needed is the community. We call this the Navigated Learning Collaborative. It already has over 65 collaborators, from content providers to funders to learning providers and technology developers. It is here we have established the Open Source Technology Foundation, where Guru Navigator is developed. Open source developers contribute to Guru Navigator's evolution. Curriculum and tool providers incorporate their interoperable services, and tech partners use open APIs to integrate Navigator's open content and capabilities into their own applications. It's where competency frameworks are developed, and where educational material like curriculum, textbooks, YouTube videos, and online courses are mapped to those competencies. And it's where the ecosystem supports each other to use these tools, design solutions, and ensure every collaborator's success. The third key element, which is ultimately responsible for learning outcomes, we call the Center for Navigated Learning. It is here that researchers develop new tools and validate them with a cohort of learners. It's where they establish evidence of efficacy and then reach the millions of learners and instructors on Navigator. It is here where the ecosystem develops recommended pathways for their cohorts, which are then used as supervised learning for our AI to improve its ability to navigate the learner. Data researchers study the activity data stream generated from users to compute efficacy of learning activities, infer dependencies between concept mastery, and relate student mindsets to proficiency in knowledge. Data scientists use corpus of content to auto-generate competency frameworks using deep learning techniques. It is when these three key elements come together that solutions are enabled to emerge and global scale can be reached. In this closed-loop ecosystem, builds on a philosophy of openness, ethical AI, and where learners own their own data, that innovation accelerates to help everyone reach their potential. Ideas are generated, they are validated and practiced, and they are recombined, localized, and improved to suit unique contexts. No matter if you are a student in a prestigious institution, a teacher seeking professional development, a refugee without access to schools, or learning trade skills to improve your income, Navigator works for you. Let's meet the team behind Guru. Dr. Prasad Ram is our founder and CEO, who previously was Director of Engineering for Google Maps and established the many mechanisms we are using here today to drive a similar success with Guru Navigator. Guru's board consists of distinguished professionals and industry leaders who are passionate about science, society, and scale. And our core team are mission-focused experts passionate about open education research, technology, innovation, and social impact. At Guru, we work with our collaborators to mobilize funding support to bring navigated learning to their users. It is in the best interest of our shared mission that the ecosystem is thriving, because it is they that drive success. And with our unique business model, this becomes possible. Philanthropy and research grants fund innovation. The NLC fund that we mobilize enables collaborators to migrate their practices to navigated learning. Here, VCs and impact investors fund entrepreneurs that leverage Navigator's reach, content, or technology. Philanthropy funds specific programs around the world in K-12 education or skills training. And governments fund large-scale implementations in their states or countries. Revenues from a $1 per active learner per year fee funds NLC operations that include cost of outreach, training, support, maintenance, and hosting. And what's powerful is that all NLC contributors can share in the NLC revenues in exchange for providing corresponding services. This is the GPS for learning. This is the learning ecosystem that can drive systemic change. Help fund this ecosystem and learn more at guru.org.
Hello everyone, I'm Jordi Diaz Gibson. I'm a researcher and professor in Ramon Llull University in Barcelona, Spain. I also lead the Net Edu project. It's a project, it's an international one that gathers researchers, leaders from the education and the social field from many diverse organizations and institutions around the globe that are willing to build a systemic and collaborative culture in education in order to face the complex challenges that we are all facing beyond COVID, also climate change and also poverty and many, many issues that education has a strong voice and strong potential to really build sustainable responses. So with the Net Edu, we started 5 years ago to think together with these leaders from around the world to think about how can we find specific points that really make a change in the system, in the way that we can walk towards this collaborative culture, systemic environment, and a new way of performing as a leader and also as an educational professional, thinking about not only our own organization, but also the systemic community of people and organizations, and thinking about how can we better collaborate to really establish a learning ecosystems where everyone can learn and everyone can really take most of them in an individual way, but also building a social well-being in terms of equity and trying to look after our planet in terms of having a really sustainable life, so that everyone can really build their own capacities to live and work towards the well-being of everyone in this world. So in this sense, we started to think about these specific points in the system that we could really focus to make the change happen. So we really ended up with the idea of the need of changing schools. In this sense, we saw that schools around the world really need a systemic change in order to rethink the way they perform, the way they relate to other actors, both internal actors, students, families, educators, but also external actors, thinking about community actors and the real life. So in this sense, we started to build what we call the School Weavers tool. And the School Weavers tool really supports leaders to have a systemic perspective on change and to really focus on culture, not on final outcomes, final outputs, no, not on that, but focusing on building, nurturing, flourishing and thriving culture where everyone supports each other and that everyone can learn, that where everyone has a voice and where everyone is really in charge and has agency to work towards change and to really make the most out of its own and advance toward this idea of a systemic culture and well-being of individuals and also society and planet. So we started to work on this idea of what are the key measures that can support support the learning ecosystems to thrive. So we ended up with this circle of systemic views and this circle of systemic performance where all actors will thrive. And we ended up with this circle.
Hello, thank you very much for this invitation to be part of the Learning Planet Festival 2021. I'm Sean Slade, Senior Director at ASCD. For those who don't know ASCD, we're a global education nonprofit based in the Washington, DC area. We have about 115,000 members in about 128 countries. And we're focused on not only effective pedagogy and educational leadership, but also a whole child approach to education, ensuring that each child is healthy, safe, engaged, supported, and challenged. And that's what I want to talk to you today about as part of this little video. So when we talk about or ask the question about main challenges or what our organization addresses, I want to focus on the area of my work, which is a whole child approach to education. Now, this focus from ASCD, and we've been a leading voice and advocate for it in the US and globally for over a dozen years now, came out of a commission that we hosted back in 2007. And we released a publication called The Learning Compact Redefined, a call to action, which summarizes what this commission came up with. And the commission was posed a question about how do we want to reinvent or reimagine education? Now, this was 2007, and 2007, for those who know it, in the US, was in the middle of the No Child Left Behind years, when the focus was very much around academics only and high-stake testing. And the commission believed then, as we do now, that schools should be there to prepare more than just the cognitive, but the social, the emotional, the physical, the mental, the civic areas of the child and the student, so that they're prepared not only for schooling and learning, but they're prepared for life beyond the education systems. We actually came up, this was last year, 2020, we released a new version of this Learning Compact called the Learning Compact Renewed, which was a recommitment to what we wrote in 2007, but we wanted to also put it into a more of a current context. And even though this was written in 2019, much of what we wrote in it actually applied more to 2020. The focus of the Learning Compact Renewed was really to remind people and remind students themselves to see themselves as part of the bigger world, not only as part of their community or part of their state or region or country, but part of the world that they live in. And then that they're not only part of that world, but also to be agents of change and change makers of that world also. When we talk about something that we're proud of, and I'm proud of personally as well, is back in November of 2019, we launched a whole child network of schools. Now, this is a network that provides the surveys, the tools, the framework for schools, not only to start a whole child approach to education, but it provides the same tools, frameworks, and platforms for them to grow and build as they progress along their whole child journey. And what's been really amazing since we launched this in November was that we have almost 2,000 signups, 348 school districts, every state and every territory in the US, almost another 500 additional schools, 23 universities, 22 of our own affiliates, and spread across 57 countries. We are hoping in 2021 that this continues and this becomes a network that can share and learn from each other, whether they be in the US or whether they be anywhere else in the world. It certainly seems to have caught the imagination and the focus of many schools and districts and countries around the world. But there is an obstacle that we're still tackling that we were tackling back in 2007. And it's this ongoing debate around the purpose of schools and the purpose of education. Should it be focused only on academics, content delivery, or content acquisition, or should they be focused more, as we believe, on a holistic development? This image, many of you may recognize, it doesn't apply to 2020 and the pandemic. It actually came out in 2014 and was coined and developed by Pasi Sahlberg, the Finnish educator, who was also one of our board members at the time. So the global education reform movement refers to the spread that started in the US of these high-stake accountability systems, focus on annual yearly progress, but measured only in terms of academics, and also a very narrow form of academics. So what we're trying to do with our Whole Child Network is actually try and have a new global education reform movement, but one that focuses more on a learner-centric, human-centric focus on education, a more humane focus on education, one which is holistic and child-centric, a whole child approach to education. And we're starting to see that as more and more people utilize our resources, and also more and more people sign up for our Whole Child Network. Now, an effective example of collaboration in addressing a complex issue is we actually did a Whole Child Network pilot study from 2012 to 2015, where we had 10 schools across the US and one in Guam, and we're actually able to track and see how they were utilizing the framework and the resources. And what became obvious through this was that the framework was providing guidance and clarity, not only for what they were currently doing, but also for what they were doing and how in other areas, and how that was fitting back under that umbrella of a whole child approach. What was also evident in this pilot study was the ability of these schools and stakeholders to share not only issues, but to illuminate solutions. And that these solutions were not just coming from neighboring schools with other neighboring schools, and they weren't even coming from an urban school liaising with an urban school, but you were finding schools around the country in different settings providing different examples about what could be successful. And so this way of getting common clarity, but also the ability to network and share, was really emblematic of the Whole Child Network successes in this pilot study. And so when we focus on some of the key things that we would like people to look at around collective problem solving, we're going to hark back to some of the things I've already mentioned. But one of the key ones also is I'm a big believer in mindset. So if you change somebody's mindset in why they're doing something and what the purpose is, you will subsequently get change in their actions. So really trying to get that common goal around what's the purpose of education, either at a national level or even down to a school and classroom level, to have those discussions. But at the same time, to try and have those discussions across a network where you're sharing and learning from each other. And one really beneficial thing coming out of 2020 has been the ability that we have to not only share expertise, but share expertise with groups that maybe wouldn't be able to travel to conferences. So we're getting a lot more divergent voices, a lot more divergent solutions that we can all link into. I'm going to end up with a quote here that comes from the Learning Compact Renewed as well, because I think is very apt at this time. It's not too late to seek a better world. And I think everything that we start to do from this point onwards, we should be seeking to seek a better world. And what's been really reassuring is that whether it's been via the Learning Planet work or the Global Leaders, Education Leaders Partnership, or even the OECD 2030 Future of Education and Skills work that I'm involved in, there seems to be a common groundswell of direction and key elements, things around student agency, items and discussions around learning ecosystems, local control, empowering teachers, but ultimately this call for a focus on individual and collective well-being. Thank you very much for your time. I hope you found this interesting. And if you have questions or want more information, please feel free to reach out. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Heather Singmaster, and I work at the Center for Global Education at Asia Society. We are an international nonprofit organization that works to develop globally competent youth, prepared for college, work, and citizenship in an interconnected world. It is no secret that we are living in a time of rapid economic, technological, and social changes, which are creating a world that is ever more interconnected. To take advantage of global and local market opportunities, companies want to hire workers with global competence. That is, the capacity and disposition to understand and act on issues of global significance. But even beyond the need for global competence for business reasons, we know that individual actions reach around the globe, and students must understand the impact they can make. Environmental concerns, economic shifts, global poverty, population growth, human rights, political conflict, and of course, pandemics, can seem intractable and overwhelming, yet they require collaborative action on an international scale. Global competence is required to be a thoughtful and participating citizen in your local as well as national and global communities. Many years ago, in collaboration with stakeholders representing education, business, and the community, the Center for Global Education developed this widely adopted definition of global competence. You can see here the 4 domains. The first is investigate the world. Global competence starts by being aware, curious, and interested in learning about the world and how it works. Students are asked to develop globally significant questions, analyze evidence from multiple sources, and develop an argument that draws defensible conclusions. Second is recognize perspectives. Students recognize that they have a perspective and someone else may or may not share it, but they can weigh all sides and from that incorporate different perspectives into their point of view. Third is communicate ideas. Globally competent students effectively communicate their ideas with diverse audiences, including through the appropriate use of technology. And last is take action. By applying what they've learned, students can translate their ideas into appropriate actions to discover solutions for both local and global challenges. Much of our work at the Center for Global Education has focused on schools. We create professional development, curriculum, and training, especially for a network of small schools throughout the country and increasingly the world, called the ISSN, or the International Study Schools Network. Network members are full school models of what it means to deliver a global education. All subjects integrate global content and skills and use an interdisciplinary project or problem-based model. We have found that students are much more engaged in this model. They see that their diversity and culture are valued, and they see the real-world application of what they're learning. Therefore, we have much higher graduation rates in our schools. At Asia Society, we believe strongly in collaborative action through building networks such as the ISSN. And in 2011, we also created the Global Cities Education Network, or GCEN, an international learning community that seeks to share promising practices and develop responses to systemic education problems, ultimately improving education for all. Together, GCEN members are examining the theme of redesigning education systems to be equitable and future-ready. In our COVID world, this is something that many systems are undertaking, and as they do so, a critical component should be teaching students to be globally competent. The redesigned future is blended and includes high-quality, problem-based learning that not only prepares students with future-ready skills, but illustrates that the world is interconnected and relies on collaboration across borders. This is needed not only during the COVID crisis, but also for our shared global future. Thank you so much for having me, and we at the Center for Global Education look forward to collaborating with partners across the globe to bring this vision to fruition. Thank you.
When I was a child, I was fascinated by science. Science was everywhere and seen as a positive and beneficial aspect of our society. In primary or secondary school, or even during my advanced studies in astrophysics, no one ever taught me anything about climate change. This subject didn't spread outside the community of climate sciences. Today, young people no longer accept not to be informed about climate change because it has become very concrete in their daily life and it is a threat for their future. The current pandemics clearly highlight the fact that we are all interconnected. Wherever we are on the planet, we all depend on each other. The CO2 that we emit does not stop at any border and impacts the whole humankind. The issue of climate change is so important that education cannot continue to ignore it. Giving to any population the right tools to understand but also to act facing global warming has become a key priority, and it has been highlighted in the Paris Agreement. Climate education should start with young people in primary and secondary school. For these reasons, we founded the Office for Climate Education together with scientists and pedagogues from all over the world. The Office for Climate Education's core mission is to bridge the gap between the scientific and educational communities in order to promote climate change education at primary and secondary school worldwide. At the OCE, we work around three axes. We produce and disseminate free, interdisciplinary, and multilingual pedagogical resources on climate change. We provide teacher trainers around the world with professional development and support, and we assist education systems as well as policymakers in the integration of climate change into the school curricula. Since it has been created, the Office for Climate Education has trained more than 1,000 teachers around the world and produced several pedagogical tools to go along with different IPCC reports. For instance, concerning the IPCC report, Ocean and Cryosphere in a Changing Climate, we produced a set of resources for teachers to approach this topic in classrooms. We have written a teacher's handbook, including around 20 hands-on activities based on interdisciplinarity and active pedagogy, as well as a summary for teachers of the IPCC report, interactive online multimedia animations, and videos of researchers explaining in simple words the key concepts of climate change. Our resources also present concrete examples of adaptation and mitigation projects that took place in the schools. These tools are available for free and developed in 4 languages: English, French, Spanish, and German. As many other organizations involved in education, our activity has been complicated by the COVID pandemic. It is difficult to train teachers and to implement class projects when the schools are closed. But hopefully this obstacle will be over soon. More generally, we face 3 main challenges when it comes to climate education at primary or secondary school level. First, climate change is a complex topic that needs a fully interdisciplinary approach. A lot of teachers feel uncomfortable with this subject, and school system is often not adapted to multidisciplinary teaching methods. Second, in most of the countries of the world, climate change is still absent from the official curricula. Therefore, it is difficult to ask teachers to spend a lot of time on this topic, and they actually need time to teach it properly. Third, climate change education has not yet fully been conceptualized, especially on its objective. We at OCE think that we need to help students not only to acquire knowledge, but also to act in the community. How to step out from learning to acting is a complex question. Clearly, yes. And actually, collaboration is deeply rooted in the DNA of the Office for Climate Education. Because climate change is a systemic issue that involves various aspects of our environment and societies, a constant dialogue between scientists of different fields and pedagogues is crucial to to properly embrace the topic. Our ambition is also to tackle the challenge of climate education at an international level. Indeed, such global issue has to do with everyone, and knowledge is by essence universal. Saying that, the roots and the impacts of climate change have also very local and specific aspects. Therefore, in order to act as a global but also local scale, international collaboration is key. Local partners are very important, not only to produce locally relevant education resources, but also to implement the projects in the schools and support teachers. Education is a complex matter that is strongly structured by societies and political views. With the ambition of a more transformative education, we believe that we should definitely keep working with and for the teachers, but also with and for the governments and education authorities. We want to offer support to any countries wishing to increase the place of climate change in their school system by working on curricula or on teachers' professional development. As a center under the auspices of UNESCO, we aim to work in a systematic and integrative way. Creating a positive transformation in societies can only be done with strong collaboration at all scales.
Learning to become, learning to learn, learning to thrive, learning to flourish, learning to care.
Hello, my name is Jacob Schursen, and I'm the founder and director of the Center for Hybrid Intelligence and the Citizen Science Project Science at Home at Aarhus University in Denmark. And I'll talk to you today about a concept that I think we've all heard about, which is thinking globally and acting locally. But the question is, how can we do that? And the potential solution that we pose is that we can solve the SDGs one game at a time. I'll talk about 3 games, but before I do that, I'll talk just briefly about the Center for Hybrid Intelligence, in which we use citizen science games to generate large-scale data from natural science games and social science games, and we combine that with studies of machine optimization to form something that we call hybrid intelligence. And from that, we have a set of games and tools that we use in our impact and applied research section. And today, I'll only talk about the Games for Good section and the 3 games. The first game that I'll talk about is called the Corona Minister. In this game, students and the general public are allowed to step in the shoes of what we call the Corona Minister and is supposed to find optimal containment and reopening strategies, while at the same time balancing not just the number of casualties and minimizing those, but also having an eye on the minimizing the impact on economy, the civil rights imposing, and also the general mental health and psychological well-being of the population. And so the students, when they have hands-on feelings of how to deal with the complexities of finding those balances and optimal strategies, they generate a feeling that this is not an easy choice. They may be able to find good solutions and reflect on what they think their optimal trade-off is. And at the same time, they, for instance, realize that the general well-being of a nation is also something to be counting in. And so from that global perspective, we think that we've now created a safe space, a psychologically safe space, to let students collectively reflect on the personal issues that they have encountered with relation to COVID-19. And so they are bunched in difficulties and hardships, and also more positive sides. And it ranges from feelings of emptiness and powerless and moodiness and headache, but also on the positive side, less stress, healthier lifestyle, and a feeling of cherishing every moment. So that was a game where we start out globally and then we turn into the local perspective. The second game is in relation to the project called Science for Global Goals, which is run by the Smithsonian Science Education Center, in which they create community action guides around each of the SDGs. And our part of that collaboration is that at the beginning of such an interaction and such a action towards solving or addressing one of the SDGs, we have a set of behavioral economics games that are meant to illustrate the underlying social dilemmas for each of the global challenges with behavioral economics. And then as the students have gained a global perspective on the generality of the challenges of the, for instance, the collaboration and competition structures that are underlying it, then they can start to dive into the local challenges and the concrete mechanisms using simulations that we also develop. I'll talk about one game in particular, which is the Urbanizer game, which investigates the transition from microscopic understandings of fairness and exchange to what macroscopically emerges in the societies. Because on an individual level, if we have two people, then the exchange is very well understood, also from a behavioral economics sense. So you can have either sort of one-sided exchange, which is generosity from the rich to the poor. There can be reciprocity, where both parties give equal amounts to each other, and you can have an equity version in which you give according to your capabilities of giving. So this is understood, and our attitudes towards that are very well understood. But then what kinds of emergent structures come from a large part of people interacting in this way is not really known, because we see lots of different kinds of societies. And what we're doing in this game is illustrating these trade-offs between collaboration, competition, self-witness, and altruism in a game where we have 20 players. They each get a different number of resources per turn that they can then distribute around in trade routes, or they can keep to themselves. And what we then investigate and facilitate a discussion around is then the emergent phenomena that underlies then many of the different challenges with competition and collaboration underlying the social dilemmas on how we can fight the SDGs. The third game that I will talk about today is around creativity, which is a complex and contextual and nuanced skill that's hard to assess, hard to understand, but we do know that it is essential for solving innovatively many of the SDGs. So our approach in the group has then been to form a creativity portfolio in which we have merged together games that have components of creativity with psychometric tests and standardized testing of aspects of creativity. And I could talk much more about that, but today I'll just talk about one particular game in that suite, which is called Crea Blender, the SDG edition, in which we have digitally and AI enhanced creativity, because we have image blending by the user, but underneath it is then a powerful GAN that helps the user combine images into meaningful new images. And the mission that we pose in this particular sub-challenge is to mix these images in order to form personal utopian or dystopian images. So that means we are inviting to introspection, reflection about what your ideal or scary future looks like. And in this way, we're really facilitating this outwards, this global perspective on what the future could be, look like, and then we facilitate that as an action towards taking concrete action, having discussions about which action to take. All of this is only possible with the broad range of collaborators that we have in the group, and I would like to thank all of those. Thank you for the attention. Thank you very much.
Hello, my name's Alan Bolton, and I'm the Managing Director of Dartington Trust and the Founding Director of Weave. The Learning Planet Festival asks how we can reimagine learning. It may be useful to ask what our systems serve, the economy or something greater than that. How and why might we affect systems change? We see with climate how statistics are unlikely to convince people to change habits and patterns. But in a time of climate crisis, mass biodiversity loss, and obscene inequality and inequity, there's arguably never been a more vital time to press for change. The psychologist James Hillman states that statistics are unlikely to move anyone to change. He says, the motivation must come from below the superego, from the id of desire. When you love something, you want it near, not to be harmed. Beauty astounds and pulls the heart's focus out of this human-centered insanity toward wanting to keep the cosmos there for another spring and another morning. This is ecological emotion, and it's aesthetic and political at once. A number of years ago, I was asked to lead a project for the government of Luxembourg called Meeting Point. The project and the discoveries we made continue to inform my work today. Meeting Point was started to promote intercultural learning and brought together young people from around Europe and further afield. I would go on to lead the project for 12 years and transformed this annual event into a lab that brought young people together with artists who were interested in collaboration and place-based inquiry. We were looking at ways to deepen our attention and our ways of knowing each other and the wonders and complexities of place. For 3 weeks we explored forms of collaboration to experience how others worked, how they saw the world, and what their methods, approaches and disciplines might reveal of the place. I also invited people to participate who'd been selected as potential change agents in social and healthcare institutions, schools and universities. They would all report that we were going further and deeper in these 3 weeks than they did in a whole academic year. When I later got involved in academia and advising schools and universities around the world, I adapted these pedagogic and creative models for those settings. I would like now to describe one of those. In 2003, I designed an MA in Arts and Ecology for Dartington. The course came out of a series of extended conversations with artists, scientists, economists, designers, engineers, who were all experts or even leaders in their fields. They all said that there were questions that interested them that were outside of the scope of their method or somehow beyond the reach of their discipline. They also talked about people from other fields whom they admired and who seemed to have insight that eluded them. They expressed a desire to find ways to collaborate. I shaped the master's degree as a way to bring these people together in regular learning labs designed to allow them to inhabit each other's practice. The model was simple and based upon the work in Luxembourg. We used the Dartington estate as our focus, and in turns, one of the experts led us in a brief, practical inquiry that employed their way of knowing to find out about the place. After 3 days, they rejoined the group, and a second person led an inquiry that allowed us to inhabit their practice, focused on the same place. Over a period of 3 weeks, we would employ at least 3 different ways of knowing. The process was based on our collective desire to know the place deeply and to reach beyond our habits of seeing, thinking and knowing, as well as on a relentless curiosity and the wish to try to know the world through others. This encouraged connection and a love of place and for kinds of learning and collaboration that incited a yearning for more. What became clear was that a close attention to place, any place, when approached through the prism of numerous ways of knowing, will reveal endless complexity. Hans-Georg Gadamer said that an encounter with an other and being presented with different perspectives and worldviews that may jar with our own was first of all an opportunity to know something of the construction of one's own worldview, perspective and prejudices. If both parties then engage fully in this, then there may, according to Gadamer, be ways to meet the other. I think now of a recent conversation with one of the founders of a major international consultancy committed to solving global challenges. It was clear that although they had offices all over the world, the business model and the forms of inquiry were based on North American settings. There was a stated desire to learn and gain vital insight from projects in other bioregions, but the business model dominated and overruled the potential to learn. In my work at Dartington, we've redesigned all the learning programs at Schumacher College and the New Art School. They're all focused on regenerative culture and based on the kinds of pedagogy I've started to describe here, with collaboration and community central to the learning. Short, intensive, place-based programs with online and peer support. The courses are proving to be almost overwhelmingly popular. We're currently working on a certificate in planetary health that will use an acre of land at Dartington and others across networks of schools as a focus. You'll recognise a familiar pedagogic strategy by now. The mission of my company Weave is to nurture systemic wisdom. We're currently expanding to establish learning hubs around the globe. Our focus is on leadership, learning innovation and place. We're working to establish a coalition to reimagine learning, that includes a curated portfolio of learning experiments that test out place-based models to allow the coalition and partners to devise adaptive strategies and solutions to challenges for wider dissemination, testing and refining. Learning from and with each other is vital if we're to meet the challenges of our time. The kinds of curiosity, collaboration, criticality and compassion I've tried to describe here seem to me to be central to this. I would go further and suggest that love needs to be at the heart of learning. A love of the places we're in, with all their complexity and wonder, along with a love of learning. A number of years ago, the activist Dan Gretton surprised me by saying we need slow activism. I mentioned this the other day when talking with Tom and Natasha Rivett-Karnak from Global Optimism. Tom replied to say that there's greater urgency now. I wonder still if, in reimagining learning, we might consider how to draw upon an urgent love, a love that attends to the wonders of our world, even in a time of crisis and emergency, perhaps especially so, and a love that does not look away when there's pain, grief and loss, or difference and injustice, a love that wants to know more, that's careful not to project, or for expectations to overwrite encounters and experience. Can there be an urgent love? Could there be forms of learning that are informed by an urgent love? A love that helps us to know that we can no longer act upon the world as if it is dead, inanimate, not part of us, but that helps us to know that we are our environment. This could be the way to empathy and be part of the solution to the great challenges we face. It might also be the way to reimagine learning based on love, empathy, and connection. I'll finish with a quote from Rebecca Solnit. To hope is to gamble. It's to bet on your futures, on your desires, on the possibility that an open heart and uncertainty is better than gloom and safety. Inside the word emergency is emerge. From an emergency, new things come forth. The old certainties are crumbling fast, but danger and possibility are sisters. Thanks for listening.
Hi, this is Kavita Sanghvi from CNM School and NT Parakh Pre-Primary School, Mumbai, India. So we are a K-12 school catering to more than 3,200 students. At CNM School, the vision is to facilitate holistic learning, building character, and developing skills to meet the global challenges. We strive to ensure that we are reaching every student through varied academic, curricular, and co-curricular activities like sports, dance, music, yoga, martial arts, and art and craft. In fact, we've created our own in-house team curricula, but very often the challenge that we face is how do you measure that skills and holistic development in the students? Yes, we do have our board exams which speak of academic success, but values, skills, overall personality development is one major concern. And we are a school which is more than 20 years old. So we decided that we need to have a third agency evaluate us so that we can celebrate our strengths and work on our shortcomings. Last year, we went for 2 agencies for accreditation and certification. The first agency was NABIT, National Board of Education and Training, from Quality Council of India, headed by the Prime Minister of India. Now they conduct 2 visits. First is the readiness visit, which understands how ready are you for the final visit. And the final visit where they evaluate you on 50 parameters to understand if you're anywhere close to your quality objectives. And they interview every stakeholder both within and outside the organization to get a 360-degree perspective. I'm very happy to share that we started this process in the month of October 2019. And in the month of January 2020, we had a readiness visit. We had a lot of red marks because we had realized that there are many areas where documentation was required. So we all worked very, very hard, and in the month of March we had a final visit. And we received the accreditation in month of May 2020. The second certification we wanted was the International Dimension in School certificate from British Council. which measures international mindedness and global awareness in our students. So we began the process in May 2019. And in May 20, in around June 2020, we had to submit it, but because of lockdown, we ended up submitting in October 2020. And in January 2021, the first Jan itself, we received the certification. So extremely happy to share that we successfully attained both of them, and we received constructive feedback on the way forward to improve our processes. And this I owe it to the entire team of teachers and students. Now, what couple of things that has happened across this entire, we're a school catering to more than 3,200 students. And with the lockdown, we had to shift the entire huge population to online teaching and learning. And the journey did have hiccups. We began experiment with a lot of online assessments also, moving back and forth from Google Forms, MS Forms to ExamNet. So we started initially with one camera, we moved on and we noticed the students were cheating. So we moved on to 2 cameras. As we saw students' academic performance shoot up by 20-30%. And it was really unnerving. Someone who struggled with maths concept, suddenly you find the child scoring full marks. And you know that there has been some kind of a foul play. And we did have countless meetings with students and parents to ensure and sustain academic honesty. But somewhere we have been unsuccessful. Currently the students are enjoying a very strong academic report. And my biggest obstacle to counter this problem are the government regulations that have said, the schools cannot reopen. Because unless we have an offline evaluation, we will not be able to compare the marks of the online and help to fill in the concept gaps and misunderstandings. Nevertheless, this year has offered immense learning, and I never ever felt that we would be able to hone our technological skills so sharply. Like in the month of May, we honestly were clueless how to reach out to our students. We did have a Facebook page, we did have a school website, we did have a school portal, and we did use free Zoom links. But we realized in the free Zoom links, the students was much smarter than us. They actually knew how to control us. So what we did at that time is we spoke to a lot of fellow organizations. We spoke to educators across the country and international. We joined organizations like the Indian Principals Network to understand what other principals are doing. And I think the number of webinars I attended at that time, I must have been available attending a webinar every day to understand what is it they are doing. And after all of this gauging and continuous meetings with the heads and all that, we finally ended up with a paid network to ensure that all 3,200 students were brought into a very organized system and structure. So this tells me that every educator in this entire lockdown period had a story to share. People had made mistakes, but now from those mistakes, we learned how to avoid those mistakes. So this journey has been immensely appreciating. Until today, I count on those collaborations. Now, all this has given me very deeper sights on leadership. And that is that one has to be a continuous learner and contributor. If you have learned something, share it. You might feel people may know this or that, but the truth is, I can get something out of it. Because most of the time people are scared of saying what they don't know. So I feel it's time that we create platforms where we share what we know, and this opens up areas of questioning and problem solving. A good question always promotes deep thinking and discussions, and that's what really supports us. I have learned immensely from this entire last year, and I thank all my fellow educators for really supporting my learning curve. Thank you so much.
Can arts be a game changer in education? Can community arts have a print on our society? Through the Community Arts Network, we would like to engage those who think the powerful transformative qualities of arts can be used for social impact. Let's travel in time a little bit to understand where we are now. 1989 was a very promising year for humanity. The Cold War ended, the Berlin Wall came down, the internet was born. 1989 was the year Francis Fukuyama's book was published, in which he declared the end of history. Progress has triumphed was the overarching sentiment in the West. All that remained was driving further growth and technological progress, iron out a few details, and the twin stars of liberal democracy and market economy will light our way into a future of freedom and wealth. Very soon we realized this promise did not become a reality. Despite all our pride and technological ability, we soon found ourselves in a world full of crisis and dangerous paths. Whether thinking of climate change, poverty, social injustice, today we live with complexity, threat, uncertainty, polarization, socio-political, ideological and identity crisis, lost faith in values and the rising dominance of populist pragmatism. In this challenging environment, arts have a unique role, a vital responsibility and a transformative opportunity for a meaningful change and greater impact. One of the greatest obstacles, if not the greatest, in meeting today's grand challenges is that they are complex, interconnected and emergent by their very nature, while our customary tools to deal with them are specialized, targeted and work in silos. In many ways, we believe at the Community Arts Network that we are at a civilizational crossroads. And what we had envisioned at the end of history may very well be, after all, the end of an era, defined by the ideologies and faith rooted in the Industrial Revolution and the Old Enlightenment. A logic and framework built into all aspects of our systems, but one that cannot guide us successfully in facing our new challenges anymore. Behind the common thread, it seems we need a cultural shift. Because art's power resides exactly in transcending boundaries, in its ability to connect and harmonize, to provoke and reconcile, create and likely allies, reframe questions, to help us exercise our moral imaginations and to build a bridge between emotions and rationale. It has the potential to heal and let people flourish even when they have lost hope. It inspires and lets people who cannot see a positive future anymore reimagine another world, another tomorrow. Because human dignity means more than just fulfilling basic needs. It means letting people shine and thrive. The Community Arts Network enables, engages, and empowers individuals, organizations, and communities through arts in 6 partnerships for impact. Art for climate, art for well-being, art for business, art for democracy, art for hope, and arts for education. Education is our technology to shape evolution, more than just a subject of learning, but a medium of learning, exploration, connection, and development. Many amazing projects exist around the world. Now is the time to connect and work together in shaping a common future with inspiring co-creators of change. There is a shared purpose, but multiple focus, with no central node, rather than a shared space in the middle where we believe arts can develop organically and help speak to our hearts and minds. We should be, each of us, a node in each other's networks. What are the impact areas? How and where multidisciplinary arts can be a game changer? Answers are only possible by learning from the others and developing collaborative synergies. How does this materialize in our daily work? Art for education to transcend boundaries regarding language and communication. Art for education in developing peace-building projects, interreligious or interfaith dialogues. Art for education in creating a space for learners in handicap situations. art for education in reducing gender inequalities, art for education in fighting against dropouts in schools, art for education in giving back imagination, confidence, self-esteem, and dreams. Because there is impact beyond information, because we have to change our as communities, and because we need to reimagine tomorrow, we invite all of you who are interested in such a journey to connect with us to join an Art for Education movement. We propose to rethink art's role in schools, discuss impact to enable and empower, and integrate beyond existing silos.
Hello everyone, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are today. My name is Pauline. I am really happy to be with you today on the occasion of the International Day of Education. It really is a welcome opportunity to be celebrating learning in these challenging times, and so let's enjoy it together. A great and big thank you to the Learning Planet team for organizing such an impactful and a meaningful event. I will try my best in the next few minutes to highlight a few learnings, because we're celebrating learning. So let's talk about learnings. A few learnings about my journey as the co-founder of WAIST. WAIST being an aggregating platform for professional organizations working in the social and environmental space based out of Kolkata. I'm French, but I moved to Kolkata around 3 years ago. And this idea of creating such a community, I have to say, first came from a very personal need to better connect in an environment that I didn't know. I was coming from one country to another, from a continent to another, from a culture to another very different one. And I needed to stay away from isolation and really connect with people that were like-minded, that I knew from the very beginning we would be on the same page. And so this is where the WAIS concept started coming to mind. And then there was this more analytical observation of the space, of the sector over there. And I think it would be quite fair to say it is the case in other regions of the world as well, where a lot of impact-focused organizations, NGOs, social enterprises, impact-focused companies, and other foundations were relatively small and definitely not working together, doing great work in their own corner, on their own domain of expertise, but not seeking for collaboration. And I am not going to teach you anything saying that collaboration can multiply the impact so much, right? And so this is from these couple of observations that WAIST came to mind as a need to be the dot connector, if I may say. And that only, being the dot connector, is a very tough task. You need to be really dedicated to being at the service of your members, of being the atmosphere creator, being the connection creator, being the collaboration creator. And that takes a lot of efforts and a lot of skills to be able to know each of your members, each of the organizations in your community so well that you will know what to do and how to connect them. One of the learnings I got from this adventure at WAIST, which by the way has been associated very tightly with the educational space and with a group that is called Techno India Group that has been supporting WAIST since the beginning. And it's interesting because by being connected with the educational space, we can also connect students with professionals from the social and environmental space and create this message of, yes, there are careers in the impact space that students can seek. And so one of the learnings that we got from WIST was the magical effect of the basic encounter. To me, this is the low-hanging fruit of communities and impact. Putting people in the same room. That is it. Creating physical moments, creating encounters for that matter. You could be, let's say, meeting your wife or your future husband at tomorrow's party. In the very same way, when you are meeting a new person that you know is more or less sharing the same ambitions and the same values, you don't know how impactful such a collaboration can be, and it can be really, really powerful. And so just by realizing the power of the encounter, we set up from September 2019 onwards what we call WIST monthly meetups, which are basically monthly meetups. We just gather the members of the community in the same room, and we structure it in such a way that we manage to trigger action-oriented discussions through roundtables. And that not only creates collaborations, but also entertains and maintains on a monthly basis your need to connect and to seek for more collaboration and to seek for more friends as well. And in the impact space, it's very important for people to know they are not alone, they're not lonely. And they should not be feeling lonely in that ambition towards impact, because many other people have the same ones. So that has been a very strong learning. And so the long-term ambition on this is really to, in the same way we have a Kolkata chapter and a Darjeeling chapter, opening such hubs in local cities throughout the East and Northeast regions to create very local sustainability-related dialogues and create connections at the local level that are relayed at the national and the regional and the international level afterwards. Another learning that I wanted to share with you today, and I'll finish on this maybe, is you may start, when you start creating a community, you may start with the willingness to connect each and everyone into one basket. And that I have realized with a bit of experience at WIST that I don't think it will work. Not everyone is meant to connect and collaborate with everyone else. I would say it's all about smartly structuring the community so that clusters of intelligence can actually be born out of it. Clusters of intelligence only gathering people that are meant to work together. Some collaborations are not meant to happen because energies are not matching, because competencies are not complementary, etc., etc. So this is a very, very tough skill for a community to get, and hopefully WIST will get there, although we, of course, have a lot to learn. On this, I wish you a very, very Happy New Year to 2021 and a very happy International Day of Education. And I hope to be, and I look forward to be connecting with you further. All the best.
The SDG Solution Space is a makerspace at the heart of International Geneva, and the goal of this space is really to have a swarm of people who are interested to change the world in a radical way and to make it more sustainable. Everything very horizontal, people just do whatever they want and they innovate together. And you can see on the back some of the posters of the wonderful projects that have been designed already here at the SDG Solution Space.
The people that are coming to Solution Space are really diverse. It's really not just the students. Irma, for example, was here this morning talking about responsible mining and really declaring their interests in research and science. and looking at this space here as a place where science, policy, practice can come together and have a conversation.
In the Fab Lab, you will find a bunch of tools which are dedicated to digital technology. That means all those machines here are piloted by a computer, and a simple design, you send it to the computer and it works. Like if I want to cut, I just have to send the design from my computer to the machine itself, and it will do the job.
Solution space, for me, is a spot of innovation where we have all the tools available for creating innovative solutions.
For me, it's community because nobody at the solution space is a stranger. It's someone you can meet and make projects with and collaborate with.
I think it's a place of synergies where we can all boost together our potentialities and strengths to achieve things.
Hello, my name is Catalina Quijano from Bogota, Colombia. Over these past months of coronavirus, I've been leading Tadeo Lab, a wonderful and creative art science laboratory at the Jorge Tadeo Lozano University. This lab was created in 2013, inspired by the CRI. François Tadei and Gaël Mengu are my big mentors, and they inspired me in many ways these last 7 years to find innovative strategies of learning, teaching, researching, and mobilizing collective teams to solve problems and find new paths through creativity by designing experiences that allow action and bring happiness to create a better society. I started my teaching career 20 years ago, and as many of you, 2020 has been the most challenging year, not only in the academic field, but also in our day-to-day. A year that pushes us to change in every way without giving us a clue that we have made the right decisions. We all surely made mistakes. We did not have perfect days, but I'm sure we tried to manage our emotions as best as possible to continue inspiring and motivating others. We all became apprentices of life more than ever. Being in front of a team whose priority is to take care for well-being of young people, full of dreams and energy, was not easy. But I always did it honestly, and I think that finally allowed everything to flow without any pressure. Not only the world is going through a pandemic, but the organizational structure of the entire university has changed as a result of financial difficulties and new goals. These changes impacted the lab, and some of the members of my team couldn't be hired for the second semester of the year. I had to stop teaching 2 of my 3 classes, what is my real passion, to focus on new strategies that transform our work model without losing its essence, and have to work harder, be more patient, and optimistic. Our lab is defined by many students, mentors, administrative workers, and friends as their second home. There they find trust, happiness, can meet friends, and work teams to build the craziest ideas and find the most unusual solution. There we, and I include myself, find our life purpose, can trust people, learn from each other, mix talents, we connect with inspired people, and meet big challenges. And we couldn't lose this during these crazy times. So we prioritized being closer to them despite being in remote regions with a weak internet signal. We understood we couldn't stop. but we have to slow down our actions, be more attentive, not to overwhelm ourselves with tasks, ask for help if we need it, and be more than ever as a family team that cares about our projects, but also about our dreams and how we manage our emotions. We live saturated of news, bad news, fake news, real news, data and insights on coronavirus, political fights, climate tragedies. All of this can depress us, sadden us, leave us without hope. So we include meditation session to regain balance. We do body movement technique to raise awareness and do open classes with experts and with creative students to inspire us through real stories. Talented students, science journalists, magicians, photographers, musicians, travelers, dancers, urban artists, recyclers, makers, biologists, entrepreneurs share their experience. Weekly, we design also a media plan on social network and on the web that narrate the whole history of Tadeo Lab from the voice of people who have made it up. We also organize 2 hackathons and has classes in pajamas to turn on the computer camera at 7 a.m. I'm proud I work closely to everyone, giving them the confidence and the support they needed. I'm very proud the students proposed and designed new tools from their perspectives to other students and mentors during this pandemic state. An AR chemistry lab, a virtual gallery, handbooks, methodologies, a new website. I'm very proud of my dream team, and we'll be able to rethink us in 2021. Maybe we are going to be not a lab, but a ball. So let's dance this year, and thank you very much.
I am very happy to be with you to celebrate learning during the 2021 Learning Planet Festival. This year's theme being learning to take care of oneself, others, and the planet, I would like to suggest the following proposal. A learning planet must be a recognition planet. As to take care of someone, the precondition is to recognize that someone. At Reconnect, we believe that many of the problems the world is facing can be related to a lack of recognition or misrecognition. And the solution we foresee to the lack of recognition is to open recognition. When in the 60s a problem of access to higher education emerged, the answer was to open education. This led to the creation of open universities, the practice of open learning, and more recently, open educational resources. If a successful solution to access education was to open education, we believe that the solution to access recognition is to open recognition. A first opening happened in 2011, when the Mozilla and MacArthur Foundations invented the open badges. The growing adoption of open badges paved the way to the emergence of open recognition ecosystems at local, regional, and national levels. Our main achievement to date should be visible by the end of this month, quand notre rêve va devenir réalité, when our dream will come true. Rêve, R-E-V-E, stands for Recognition of Experience, Validation of Experience, a framework supported by Reconnect proposing a new approach to the recognition of prior learning, based on a loose connection between informal recognition and formal validation. To understand the link between recognition and validation for Rêve, take a cake. The bulk of the cake is the recognition, where the cherry on the cake is the validation. And many cakes don't have cherries. The most critical obstacle we are facing now to open recognition is to open the minds. Working with open badges, we have discovered that while the lack of recognition is a problem that open badges could address, there is a much more fundamental issue. The internalized belief that the only recognition that has any value has to come from authorities or outside experts. At Reconnaître, we believe that to build a learning planet, which is also a recognition planet, there is no alternative but empower all the stakeholders, or more precisely, create the conditions for the empowerment, starting with their recognition. Think of the combination of recognition and knowledge as a source of energy to feed the empowerment engine. I have been asked what would be a key thing to do to develop more effective collective problem solving. My response is, who defines the problems that need to be solved? Who set the priorities? If our aim is more effective collective problem solving, we need to recognize individuals, their problems, and their abilities to find solutions, even if they don't know yet that they have the solutions. How is it possible? Through recognition. If the recognition I have received has helped me to move, maybe the way I can have an impact on the world is through recognizing others. I would like to illustrate this short presentation of our work by focusing our attention on the issue of refugees. Some see refugees as a problem and advance solutions to solve the refugee problem. Are we ready to consider that they might have the solutions themselves but are not empowered to implement them? And that our responsibility is not to solve the refugee problem, but empower the refugees to solve their problems with their solutions.
Good day, everyone. I'm Olivier Herman, Professor of Innovation Management, and I'm doing research on collaborative practices and communities of innovation. Today, I will talk about a fascinating research object, the link between space, forms of collaboration and evaluation, and the challenge of innovation in education. With a couple of colleagues, we have been facing a few challenges while trying to introduce new pedagogical approaches in our institutions. For instance, we were asked to train engineering students into the design thinking approach and co-design, with a flavor of creativity and even arts into the curriculum. We were asked to convince head of programs that challenges and experiments are a valid form of training. And then we needed to bring students from 5 different disciplines into the same projects. All these approaches have become quite mainstream, and creativity and design have been quite extensively been documented for at least a few decades. On top of that, we have seen in quite many organizations, including educational institutions, the emergence of new type of spaces that are supposed to trigger new collaborative practices. So we can list fab labs, maker spaces, third places, open labs, learning labs, and the like. Though they are quite fashionable, often nicely equipped, and by essence very visible, these spaces have not always triggered the new practices and the dynamics of innovation they were supposed to introduce, whether in organization or in universities. Spaces by themselves have no magical effects on people. They can help modify practices, but there is a more complex equation than just changing the spatial variable. And it seems that however mainstream they may have become into the discourse, the introduction of design, creativity, arts, or project-based education into higher education might not be as easy as we thought originally. As an illustration, I would like to share with you the following idea. All educational practices and styles display a specific pedagogical signature that is composed of spaces, type of interactions, cognitive orientation, and some strong beliefs about what should be valued, what is considered as learning, and how we should evaluate. And there is an internal logic to these signatures, and that is why transitioning to a new form is a quite challenging project. Okay, let's consider the signature of a classical form of education. The space is the classroom, or often the auditorium in a university. If you would enter in an unknown building and see a classroom with desks aligned, you would think right away, oh, that's a school. No hesitation. The model here is one of the master that will transmit knowledge to the learners. He or she could engage in a dialogue, but that's still a model of broadcast from the maître, the teacher, the prof. In terms of time, we also have some expectations of 45 minutes, an hour and a half. The basic unit is the lesson. The examination and the grade are the main evaluation tools, and they are considered as legitimate instruments for assessing knowledge transfer or competence acquisition. So we see here a signature: classroom, lesson, exam, grade. Now let's consider the pedagogical signature of a school of design, an environment where we train designers. The space of reference here is not the classroom, it's the studio. The studio is pretty much a workshop, an area where students work for long periods of time on projects. It could be a studio for specific projects or for a cohort of students. It's a place where the project is central, not the lesson, and where creating something is a way to learn and to be evaluated. Evaluation is learning is made via the critique, the design crit, a regularly organized session where the designs are presented and aimed at getting feedback and new ideas. The goal is not to get a good grade, but to develop an identity, a personal style, to be able to achieve good design. So the signature here is studio, project, crit, style, and identity. So you can see that there is a tight connection between the different components of the pedagogical activities, from how we evaluate to the kind of space where we work. Shifting to a new style of learning means a rather complete transformation that does change the profession of students, meaning new expectations and role for learners, and therefore the practice of educators as well, including how to give feedback and evaluate. So space can play an important role in this transformation. Shifting from a classroom to a studio or creating a fab lab does send a message, but it's not enough to complete the transformation. There needs to be a whole system behind it, a logical system that needs to be developed and deployed. So, how can we successfully introduce new practices in education? Well, there are no easy answers, but with my colleagues, we certainly discovered that there was a path to be followed for conducting these transitions. You want to know more about it? I will be happy to discuss about it during the Learning Planet Festival 2021. See you there.